Welcome back to On the Light, a podcast dedicated to illuminating the profound teachings and legacy of Yogacharya BKS Iyengar. I'm your host, Susan Johnson. Thank you all for listening. I can't tell you how overwhelming it is for me to see that people from all over the world are listening. But of course, considering the person we are speaking of, that is how it should be. I consider myself very fortunate to be in this position, bringing these interviews to you. These interviews with Prashant, like the one you're going to hear today, started a year ago in March 2023. I'm presenting them to you in the order they were taken. The one you will hear today was given on July 30th, 2023. When I first started the interviews, I didn't know how I would use them. I was thinking maybe a documentary would come out of them or a podcast. And it was after this interview that I decided on a podcast, and I sort of sat on that idea for a while. And then by the end of 2023, I told Prashantji that I wanted to start a podcast, and he gave me his blessing. In our conversation today, Prashant begins by addressing the question I posed to him about metaphysics. He then goes on to tell Lee and I about how it came about that Guruji would be turning out teachers. Listen and hear why Prashant tells us why he says that Guruji was an underprivileged Yogacharya. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light.
So, one thing is that, in philosophical system all over the world, all the time, it is all brain processes they try to infer, analyze, and there are mathematical processes, there are statistical processes, and there are intellectual processes to understand the whole philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
While metaphysics is not an object for empirical process. And in Indian philosophies, whether it is heterodox or orthodox, they admit that knowledge is only possible, final knowledge is only possible by samadhi, which is an intuitive mystic state, and not by empirical thought process. Human brain is insufficient, incapable of understanding these realities.
Mm-hmm.
Human brain cannot understand God, cannot understand the subtle and metaphysical aspects of life, of matter and of spirit and creation. Metaphysics is not a matter that can be turned out by scientific process, analytical process, mathematical process, logical process, intellectual process. We can never arrive at it. So it is only by samadhi process, intuitive mysticism, that one can realize the realities. So we can be debating on these intellectually, empirically, but we will never reach ultimate reality.
Mm-hmm.
While Western philosophy or any other philosophy of the world at any time never had any clue to intuitive processes. They thought it's intellectual processes. Say, for instance, in our times, someone like J. Krishnamurti, he was trying to put across everything on intellectual wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
Modern philosophers, they all try to put the things on the intellectual wavelength that catch the realities. But they will never reach. So one of the mystic saints of about 100, 200 years back said, the science might realize the ultimate reality, like seeing the shrine from outside. But yoga will take the mind to sanctum sanctorum of the shrine, and he will experience the divinity in sanctum sanctorum, while the science can only infer reality. They will be outside the shrine, and they will look at the shrine and try to infer what divinity might be. But yogi will be taken into a sanctum sanctorum and will be given the experience of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's very interesting, and we can see now the modern science is now slowly crawling into the mysticism.
I'm noticing that more and more with things that I listen to and read.
Yeah.
So just to give Lee some context, I had sent Prashantji that same podcast I sent you on metaphysics and
that's why they are ending up in panpsychism. Say like whether particle is wave or is it a particle?
Mm-hmm.
The subatomic, are they particles or wave? So they say it is subjectivistic. Mm-hmm. And of course, subjectivism was postulated by Buddhism in India, one of the Hindu philosophy, because you are not looking at me now through your gadget. It is a perception. My image is falling into your psyche, and you are referring to that, saying that I am seeing Prashant. Or you are hearing me, not that you are hearing me, what I hear gets into your psyche, and it is a perception of even audition. And you say, I heard this from Prashant. Actually, you have not heard from me. Whatever I have said has gone into your psyche. It's the reflection, like camera takes the reflection of a figure, and that becomes a photograph. So our vision works in a photographic process. There is a reflection in retina, and then that casts a reflection in the brain, and therefore you say this is rose. You don't say this is rose because there is a physical rose in front of you. There is always a perception in your mind, and therefore you say this is rose. Mm-hmm. You refer to your mental imaging and not to physical object outside. And that is why the panpsychism has a very strong kind of argument that all this is mental.
Because that's all the farther they get.
Yeah. So because that is refuted in Indian philosophy. Yoga has refuted. Patanjali refutes that in the 4th chapter. The Vedanta refutes it. Sankhya refutes it. But Buddhists postulated that way. That's called Vijnanavada. And that is called panpsychism. And panpsychism, right, because everything works within your mind, and therefore you have perception, cognition, whatever, experience. How do you get experience? It has to be coming into your mind. So the mind shows a reflection and you say, this is my experience. But that is Vritti Sarupya aspect, and there is something beyond it. Anyway, we'll proceed to today's topic. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So I listened to our 3rd interview that we had back in May. And you had talked about Guruji's practice and that his private practice was very much different than what he talked. And that the latter part of his teachings post 1985, that's where he really introduced the subject of essential yoga. And then you talked about how he was a philosopher when he practiced, and you wanted us to expand on that more, which you have been in our sessions. I prepared just a couple of questions, whether or not you want to touch on them. It's up to you, but I'm curious, how did Guruji introduce or talk about yoga with you and your sisters? And did he encourage you to practice with him, or is that something you just embarked on voluntarily?
I can be touching on it, but we don't have to spend too much time on it. But today I want to talk to you about Guruji's teachings.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Guruji's teachings, actually, Guruji's teaching for teachers never ever happened until that was proposed by the Inner Education Authority of London, whether yoga could be introduced in schools. So that Guruji could not be going to all the schools in England and teach there. So then he had to opt for turning out teachers who in turn would go to schools or whatever and would be teaching. So until that time, so this was well after Light on Yoga, so about 1970. Until that time, Guruji was merely teaching. He never thought of turning out teachers. And this was but with particular reference to the West. In India, it did not do anything to train the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So none of his senior Mumbai students, Pune students, Bangalore students, nowhere were trained to become teachers. He just taught them. He did not formalize the teachers training program.
Some of the early British students wanted to introduce yoga into the schools, even to children, correct?
Yeah.
And
That's
so
the education authority.
And so they brought the idea up to, the school boards, the education boards or whatever, Susan. And then the education boards put some restrictions on Guruji about what he could teach religiously and things like that. Correct, sir? Okay.
Yeah. So they had put certain conditions, sanctions, not to bring God, not to bring religion, not to bring Hinduism. It should be purely taught as physical training, physical wellness training. So in place of physical training that they had in their schools, they wanted this to be replaced by yoga. So they wanted physical version of yoga for physical fitness to students, school-going students. Now, for school-going students, we don't teach philosophy. So that's how the teaching became important for Guruji. What I was saying was, he never thought of turning out teachers in India, because as long as he was there, he said there is no point in turning out teachers. I am teaching, and he wanted teachers to teach. So there was no kind of process whereby he would be trying to turn teachers or train teachers in India. Birjus or Jawahars or Rajvis or Shahs or Jawahars, etc. Or ourselves here in Pune or in Bengaluru or elsewhere. He never thought of turning out teachers. Because as long as he was teaching, he never thought that he should be turning out teachers who would be optional to him. He said, I'm teaching, so I will just teach yoga. So he had to turn out teachers in the West, particularly in England, when the senior education authorities approached him with certain conditions. So, and let me tell you that he was not even guiding teachers in Pune until it was 1990 onwards. When the next generation teachers started, they were brought in. How the next generation teachers came in Pune, it was not contemplated at all. Myself, Geeta and Shah, we were the three teachers from 1975. And therefore, it did not occur to him that he should turn out next generation of teachers. But with the advent of my accident, where I was out of action for nearly 18 months, for 1.5 years, I was not going to institute. So they had to take a call that who would be taking alternative to me, because I was not taking classes for nearly 1.5 years. So Guruji said I will be taking his classes. So my classes were taken up by him. And then it was thought that we must also turn out teachers. So Geeta actually started. So that's why she wrote the books, Guidelines to Teachers, Preliminary Course and Intermediate Course, etc. So that teachers can be turned out little formally. So it was 1989 that I met with an accident. So it was 1990 onwards, 91, 92 onwards. It was felt that we have to turn out teachers, substitute to me because I was out of action. And then we could not be putting burden on Guruji to take classes. So that's how it came in India, but he was not training any teachers. It was only after 95, etc., when the generation of Abhijata and Rayas came in. So then he was sitting in the corner that he used to do on ladies classes. And then he thought of training Abhijatas, Rayas, and etc. etc. Because and Geeta was also deputing her classes to other teachers such as Rajlakshmi, Chandra, Nawaz, and so many other teachers. So Guruji felt that he should be guiding them because they were never exposed to teaching, particularly at the general class, or they might have taken some private tuitions, but teaching general class is totally different than teaching a private tuition. So he felt it became imperative that he should be guiding them. So whenever these teachers, apart from Geeta, substitutes of Geeta were taking classes, so he was sitting on the corner, the roadside balcony, and he would be guiding from there as to how they should articulate, what they should look at, what should be corrected, etc., and how to put the things across. So there was no formal teacher training done in India at all. So here I might tell you, not even me or Geeta, he thought of formally giving some education about training, teaching. He never trained. One of the reasons might be that he himself was not tutored. He himself was not tutored, therefore, he had no clue as to how to be tutoring. And he thought that as he was not tutored, he should not be tutoring someone to become a teacher. So he would tell us that we have to find our own ways. He said, you have your thought process. If you don't find a solution, then you can come to me. But don't expect spoon feeding from me. You must have your own experiments and you have your trials and etc. trial error methods. And you try teaching your own way. And if you feel that you are stuck somewhere, then you have to break your head. And in spite of it, you don't get a solution. You can come and, as a last resort, you can ask me. Then it is my choice whether to give you advice or not to give advice. I am not interested in giving spoon feeding because I was not trained. I was not given any spoon feeding for my teaching. He started becoming a teacher in the 1939-40. Who was there to teach him? So he was a self-made teacher, and that's how he did not think of formally training Geeta or myself. And he did not do that. That's why many times I jokingly said to these foreigners and teachers who came to India, I said, we are uncertified and you are trying to learn under we uncertified teachers. You are already certified teachers at any level or whatever level. But we are not certified at any level. So this is how the thing was. So he wanted us to go our own way, explore our own ways. So never ever formal teaching took place for us. He sometimes was guiding and intercepting in the classes. If he said something, he would try to come and say something, put in some different words, etc., etc. Or he said, I teach him the intensives, you watch and you learn from it. So the intensives were taking place thrice a year, almost thrice a year, every year from 75 onwards, 76 onwards. So he said, you are watching me teaching, you learn from my teachings. And don't be depending on me. I don't want you to become dependents on me. You have to go your own way. So that's how we learned from watching him and with our comprehension of his teachings. Naturally, my comprehension was different than Geeta's comprehension and Shah's comprehension, or the Indian teachers, anybody who were there. Each one's comprehension was different. So that's how I should put it clearly that he did not formally teach us. Because otherwise people might think that he might have taught us very formally. He did something like that at a later generation, more formally, not very formally, to Abhijata, Raya. Rajashmi, who were taking classes in lieu of Gita taking classes. Because many times Gita could not be taking classes for different reasons. So she would depute these old students, senior students to take the classes. Nawaz, Rajlakshmi, Devki, or Chandra, they would be taking the classes. So Guruji would be trying to help them. He did not help myself and Gita that much because he knew that he thought that we should develop on our own. Because they were outsiders, he tried to help them while they were teaching. The point is, he never formally taught, no certification. Many people have this inquiry as to why Indians are not given certificate, why the certification is not in India, why don't you conduct assessments, etc. So there are different reasons, and Guruji did not encourage that. So in the West, he had to start, and once he had to turn out teachers in the West. This was 72, 73 onwards, 74 onwards, which became all over the world, whether he went to South Africa or the American, Canadian country or whatever, European country, Japan, etc. He had to depute some teachers there. Because after he came back, he wanted them to continue. He stayed everywhere for at the most a week. So he felt responsibility that he should relegate that teaching to others and train them to become teachers. So 80, 75, 80 onwards, the teaching was more with a gravity to help these students to become teachers. He gave them points so that they could be using them while they were teaching. So all his explanations were basically to equip them to become teachers. And of course, with the aftermath, he realized, and he was not happy with that. Therefore, he was not happy with the certification program later. Although he was enthused to do that and launch it and commence it and take it up. But later he found that there are lots of problems coming up. Because if we train that way, we are only turning out quacks. So what the quacks would be doing would be soon realized. But anyway, he had to formalize. So even his intensive courses here were more with the gravity of helping the students to grasp something intellectually, and then they would be able to impart it. So how to teach a pregnant woman? How to teach a particular specific problem, slip disc, arthritis, etc., etc. So this was given more prominence. So suppose he handled arthritic patient, he wanted these foreigner teachers to be around him and watch how he's helping the particular patient of arthritis. And he would explain them, this is why it has to be taken for arthritis, etc. These are the asanas to be taken for arthritis, etc. So this was a kind of, he gave the feeding to them, which equipped them to start teach. Because they, back home, they would get some patients all the time. A pregnant woman, menstruation problem, slip disc, liver problem, stomach problem, lung problem, heart problem, mind problem, some problem or the other. And therefore, it became important, it became his responsibility to equip them to become teachers. And therefore, there was more prominence given to remedial yoga for teachers. Because the teachers would be encountering patients and not students of yoga. People would come to them for some malady, some disease, some problem, either physical or mental. So he understood that, and therefore his teaching was more on the line, not teaching yoga to them, but teaching them to become teachers. Helping them to become better teacher with one visit to India. Every visit, they came to India, they could become better teachers. So lots of informations were given to them. A lot of hints were given to them. And a lot of that kind of training was given to them that yoga is remedial. And Light on Yoga also gives the same impression. With the appendix coming at the end of the book, people think if you have these problems, you keep on doing these asanas. That's how the word Light on Yoga was sold like hotcakes. And therefore, that's how Iyengar Yoga was understood, that it is all remedial yoga, maladies of body and mind. You should take recourse to Iyengar Yoga and then you find solutions. So he had to equip the students so that they could provide solutions to these ailing people. So that became very important. And therefore, his teachings also got onto the track of not teaching yoga, but teaching them to be good teachers. He wanted them to become good teachers. So to the extent possible, he went all out to give every kind of assistance, every kind of support. They would be spending the time in library, not discussing on philosophy of yoga, but some such problems. Because all teachers most of them got the impression yoga is not a philosophy and it is nothing beyond remedial yoga. Few exceptions like Lee, etc. Otherwise, most of them had this impression that yoga is something that provides solutions to our worldly, mundane health problems, well-being problems. And that's why more stress was laid on the clinical problems for human being, which appear on the body, which appear on the mind. And we just want to tackle with the clinical problems of our body and mind. So that's how Guruji's teachings radically changed. But then if you hear to my talks, which I gave in Balewadi centennial celebrations, I gave a long talk on various landmarks in Guruji's teachings, which came up due to Light on Yoga, Light on Pranayama, etc., the books. So as he was starting to write books, so when after Light on Yoga came the Light on Pranayama, then came the Light on Ashtanga Yoga. So he had to do little formal study of Patanjali's yoga. It was quite meager when he penned down Light on Yoga, because his scheme of Light on Yoga was to present good postures, faultless postures, precise postures, graphics, precise graphics of the postures, and the remedials, consumer yoga, so the yoga can become popular. But when he started penning down book on pranayam, then the book on Ashtanga Yoga, Yoga Sutras, naturally, the matter he tackled was philosophical and beyond consumerism. Nobody would take recourse to Patanjali Yoga Sutras for consumerism. There is no consumer product offered by Light on Yoga, by Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So, the philosophy of yoga started occupying his brain to a greater extent due to penning down those books, and then Ashtadhala Yoga Mala, etc., which Light on Life, until Light on Life, so many books. So his thought matter was more engaged with philosophy of yoga, tradition of yoga, culture of yoga, etc., etc. And therefore his teachings, after his 85th birthday, 80th birthday itself, there was a mishap. Otherwise, it could have been a totally different course in 1980. 1998, which was his 80th birthday. Lee might remember it well. It was in Ambrosia, but there was a mishap, and therefore he could not really, he had envisaged something, he could not follow it because of mishap. So myself and Geeta also got into that. Otherwise, we were not in the course at all. We were not supposed to be teaching. We were supposed to be participants, along with all those 800, 900 members. But then it became imperative that he could take only one session and not exhaust himself. So evening session of pranayam was relegated to me and Geeta, and we took that. Otherwise, it was not in the planning of it. The planning was he would take a morning asana session and evening pranayam session. But then it was a contingency that myself and Geeta took up the evening courses. And he had to rest. Even in the evening, he was also sometimes going to give talks. But it was imperative that he should be taking rest. He rested the evening time after the lunch, and he did not participate in, but he came and attended those programs where I gave talks. So, in line, otherwise he had some other plans to teach the 80th birthday classes, because by that time these books had all come, and he wanted to present philosophy. That happened only his 85th birthday. Even 75th birthday in Mahabaleshwar, he was touching the esoteric aspect, could not go in detail. It was just the foundational first course on 5 elements. But none of his students showed inclination to dive into the topic, dive into the matter of Panchatattwas. So therefore, it slowly went into thin air. Otherwise, he would have delineated on the Panchatattva concept, which was just opened out in 75th birthday celebration in Mahabaleshwar. But then all these students were curious, foreigners were curious to become better teachers. They wanted lots of input. They wanted to gather a lot to become good teachers. But in 85th birthday celebration, which you all have just gone through that folder, he touched the esoteric aspects. So he started teaching in 1937, 38. It took such a long time for him to embark upon what he did in his 85th birthday. So it was that the new millennium has started already. It might be 2003 that he took that course. So understand, 2003, where is 38 and where is 2003? So sometimes we say some people are underprivileged people. Guruji was underprivileged in so far as teaching of yoga was concerned. Because the need of the time was not esoteric aspects of yoga. And then he himself had to devise teachers training program, etc. So it all became extra yogic endeavor. But he had committed for it, that because that was his brainchild. So he had to take care of his own child. So suppose parents give birth to an underprivileged child, they have to take care of it. So this was misfortune. He embarked upon that particular mission, which did not give him satisfaction. But however, it was a commitment. And he did it without grudge, without any negativity in the mind. He said, I've opted for it, let me do it. And he did it wholeheartedly, not with a bitterness in the heart. So it is later he started speaking about the 4 compartments of the heart, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Aspida, the front of the brain, the back of the brain, the meditative brain, etc., etc. So he started touching those esoteric aspects. And the 85th birthday course, it was opening a portal which he could not pursue thereafter because he already stopped teaching. He had even stopped intensives, etc. So that could not be pursued after his 85th birthday. But however, in his talks or whenever he talked to them very, very informally, these things came up. Purushartha, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, Varnashram, Dharma, etc., etc. So they started cropping up in his teachings. But that was too late for him. So in my assessment, he was an underprivileged Yogacharya. He did not get suitably qualified students around him to be teaching what he wanted to teach. And therefore, I identified that he wanted to teach something, but he could not be teaching that. And that's why many times I said, you just go by what Guruji taught, and you do not at all consider what he wanted to teach, what he wanted to put across. He did not get that opportunity, which I sumptuously got it. So that's why I call myself very, very fortunate, born with silver spoon in my mouth or golden spoon in mouth, because I could do that. I did not have to dabble with this teaching, training out, turning out teachers. I have been teaching in the institute for the last 48, 49 years now. I did not on one day think of turning out a teacher, because I don't believe teachers are trained. Teachers will become. Teachers have to become. There is no way to turn out teachers. So therefore, I never indulged in turning out, picking up someone and favorite one and try to train up that person. So in last 49 years of my teaching, I have not favored anyone. Come on, I will give you some tips to how to become a teacher, because I believed it doesn't work, because we were not given any spoon feeding. I said, I should not be giving any spoon feeding. Good students will become good teachers. Make them good students. Now, Guruji could not do this. Guruji had to turn out good teachers. But I could take a lesson from Guruji that way, that I need not be turning out teachers. I should try to turn out good students of yoga. Therefore, my teaching is a totally different framework, because I consider those who are in front of me are students, and I try to give them as students. I don't know if Lee has noticed, none of our institute teachers, Remy teachers, none of them had gone from under my hands. They were not even doing my classes, 95% of them. They were not even doing my classes, but they were becoming teachers in the institute. And some of the senior students wondered this. They said, why is that no one is under your influence teaching in the Remy? I said, I have not turned out any teacher. I did not have the intention of turning out teachers. I myself, I am a student. I don't want to be doing. When I'm myself a student, I cannot be turning out a teacher. So that's different moral standard for me. And therefore, you won't find teachers under my influence or from my mold teaching in the Remy Institute, Pune. It is because I did not spend even 0.0001% to give clue how you should teach, how you can teach, how you should be teaching effectively. Never ever. I just teach the pure subject of yoga. So that was what Guruji wanted to do in his life and could not do. But in the later stages, when he was not actually teaching, then it flew from his mouth what he was intending to teach. So the Yama integration in asanas, which Iyengar teacher brings that? If somebody does that, it is only like a puppet. They themselves are not convinced, but they might say this is ahimsa in Trikonasana, that is satya in Trikonasana. This is all puppet, like a puppet, because they themselves have not really got dipped into it. But in later part of teaching, it did come up. So as I was referring to ambrosia, there Guruji told me, we were asking myself when Gita, what should we teach today? Because it was his class. We were working under his deputation. So we would ask him, what should we teach? Should we be teaching today? So on one of the days, he told me, teach Kumbhak, but not skeletal-muscular Kumbhak. So that was in his mind, that a Kumbhak pranayam can be non-skeletal-muscular, which in his lifetime he could not teach. lift the sternum, roll the shoulder back, bring the head, nape of the neck down, chin into the notch. It was all skeletal muscular when he taught, but he wanted to teach something beyond that, which he could not do. So he never got students who were qualified to be learning under him. That's why my assessment was you are underprivileged teacher. See, suppose somebody is double PhD and you engage that person double PhD to be teaching kindergarten or primary school, how is it taken? So somebody double PhD in English, but then teaching primary school English. Somebody is PhD in mathematics, but teaching primary school mathematics. So that's underprivileged teacher. So that was the case with Guruji in my assessment. He could not really teach what he wanted to teach. And later he started saying about what he wanted to teach, but could not really teach. So the point is, the time and space in which Guruji was taught was unfavorable, inclement time and space that in which he worked in 1960s to 1990s or 2000, whatever, unsuitable time, totally inclement conditions. But then he did that very, very religiously. He never had any grudge. So that he knew that it is his destiny. And therefore he did without any grudge. He did it wholeheartedly. There was not slightest bitterness in his mind about what he cannot do. It was very, very positive. But in my opinion, he was born at a wrong time. He was not born in an opportune time for what he pursued whole life. He should not have been a propagator of yoga. Somebody else should have done the propagation, etc., etc. And then Guruji should have come on the scene. Then it would have been totally a different thing. But anyway, this is the major point, that he had to give a lot of emphasis on how to help those students in front of him during intensive. They were all foreigners. He only took intensive courses after 75. He did not teach any local classes. He said, I will relegate to you. You take all local classes, but I will take only intensives. That means only foreigners. That means only teachers or would-be teachers. So the whole teaching was under that gravity of these are actually teachers, already teachers, and these are potential teachers, would-be teachers, and they would be all pursuing teachers, even if they say that we don't want to teach yoga, we want to learn yoga. But it so happened they ended up becoming teachers. May not be intending, but they became. So that was a major gravity which was working behind his teaching, that these are going to be teachers. These are already teachers. These have to be upgrading their levels, or these are going to be coming in potential teachers. Sooner or later, they will take up teaching. So the whole West was taught to be teaching yoga. While in India, that was not. He never thought that Firuza should become teacher, Birju should become teacher, Jawahar should become teacher. None of them. He just was teaching them. So he wanted them to become teachers in their own right, not because certified. Therefore, Indians, you don't find them certified, that they have certificates. Because he never did anything. He was every time only teaching them. Unfortunate thing that most of the time, initial times, another unfortunate thing for him in India, although he was teaching in India, 90% of his students, or plus more than 90%, were non-Hindus, Parsis, or Muslims, not Hindus.
Jains also.
Pardon? Jains, yeah.
The Jains.
Jains were there, of course. But mostly Parsis. Mostly Parsis. Now see the turn around by the time myself and Geeta started teaching, the Parsis they were minorities now. And Indian community was majority, while in Guruji's teachings, they were majority, Mumbai or Pune even. So naturally that influences whom are you teaching? Now, if they are not having slightest gravity of our philosophy of yoga, they are doing some consumeristic yoga. They want wellness and well-being. They want to feel fine in body, feel fine in mind, or they want to impart. They want to teach what they practice. So that was another thing. That's why in that book, which is going to come soon, I said if Guruji had settled down in Bangalore, native place, so he would have all had the native students, because in Bangalore you don't get Parsis. It's either only in Pune, Mumbai you get Parsis. Gujarat and Maharashtra, state of Maharashtra, there are lots of Parsis. Most of the Parsis are in the west of India, not in the south of India. So he would have taught people of his own community. And the teaching is so totally different. Whom are you teaching really matters. Are you teaching children? What will you teach? If you are teaching very old senior citizen, 75 plus, 80 plus, what are you going to teach? Similarly, the community. So I felt that if he had settled in Bangalore, he would not have become global figure. But his teaching of yoga would have been totally different. He would have had South Indians to teach. So he would have taught in his own language. Whereas he was totally deprived, he could never use his mother tongue or his language of the mind while he was teaching. He had to translate every time and teach that. Whereas we found that we had local people in our classes. So many times, many of the foreigners were getting irritated in my classes because I would use Marathi quite profusely. Because 90% of them were Marathi understanding people, and the Westerners won't understand damn word there. So they were little irritated, but that was flowing naturally because I'm saying 90% are Maharashtrians, Marathi speaking people, if not Maharashtrian, Marathi understanding, Marathi speaking people. So it would flow naturally. So I had that advantage. So I was not teaching Muslims, I was not teaching Parsis. And let me tell you, even teaching Americans of 1970 is greatly different than teaching Americans of 2030. So Lee might be knowing Mary Palmer of Ann Arbor.
Mary Dunn's mother, Susan.
Oh yeah, correct. Her mother. Priscilla, I forget her surname.
Priscilla White. Is it correct?
So there are so many. So yeah, Priscilla, whatever. But 1970 generation of Americans. Now youth people are open-minded, but they were quite conservatives. In 1970, this generation of 1970, big difference between Americans of 1970 and Americans of 2010, 2020, etc. A similar case in England and France and Europe, or Australia, or anywhere, because now we are more open because of the media. People are open to so many things. While they were conservatives in 1970s, so what could be Guruji teaching to very conservative Americans? Like Vivekananda had a problem when he came to United States, 19th century, late 19th century, end of 19th century. He had a problem with Americans. So you can imagine how were Americans in 19th century, early 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. Now, big difference. Now the generation is more open-minded. And even I can identify that the older students of Guruji were fundamentalists. New generation of foreign students from abroad are more open-minded. So Guruji had to teach them. So there was hardly any scope for yoga to come in. But now I can talk on dharma. You guys are all hearing that. I can talk on so many things. Where in 50 years back, it was not possible. I can do because it is now 2023. I was in no position to do it in 1995 or 2000 or 1985. No, I was in no position even if I had the prudence. So Guruji had a lot of potentials, but they were all suppressed. He could not really give them the scope to come up. It is because of the time and space situation. He was really choked because of the time and space that he was there. So if it had come little later, so jokingly, I have said many times, if I was born in 1918 and then did what Guruji did and allowed Guruji to be born in 1949 when I was born, and then give free hand to Guruji to teach, he would have taught 100 times better than what I'm teaching today. Because the spade work would have been already done by me. Because Guruji did the spade work, I can have the structure raised up. So that's why I often say that I am very fortunate to be doing what, because I am not restrained to be teaching. I can teach what I want to teach. He could not teach what he wanted to teach. That was the deprivation. Anyway, most important thing that he started giving importance to turning out teachers post 1970-72. And most of the foreigners, they started to teach. 90%, 95% of them started teaching. So they wanted some inputs to be coming helpful and handy for them to be teaching back home. So every time they came and they jotted the notes. What was the notes? What can they go and teach back home? Not much what they could practice, what they could teach back home. And they wanted every time to impress the students, some new points, fresh from Pune. Like some fresh vegetables, people flock there. So fresh from Pune, people would flock to their courses. And that's how they took advantage of it. Anyway, that's about Guruji's teachings. So I think enough for today. We can continue. If you have some questions, if formally on what I have said today, we can do that in next session. Okay, just nearing 1 hour.
I think that that a good example to people who did not know the draw on his time, who did not know the draw on Guruji's time, the pressure on his time, would be to look at his old handwritten letters. Susan, he received hundreds and hundreds of letters, and he replied by hand. And he noted up at the top of the letters which number of this year was this letter. And you might see in March or April that this was the 300 and some handwritten letter that he wrote back in response to particular problems where at that time, he didn't even have somebody typing this down for him. He was writing it his own hand, and he would write down the sequence that person was to teach this person. They were all the kind of questions that you have mentioned, sir. They want to know how to treat this malady or that malady. And Guruji had to, even more than a group of students writing down their own notes, Guruji had to write the students' notes for them. And without a computer and without an email system where he could send out some kind of mass email.
Correct. He did not have steno, but he had to write 20 letters a day on an average. 2.5 hours 2.5 hours he would spend on writing letters. And because, as I said, they were quacks, and so she had to give a lot of assistance to them.
Hmm.
When you come to practical teaching, somebody has a combination, pregnant, but blood pressure, pregnant, but lung problem, pregnant, but spine problem. So it becomes complicated once you are starting to teach, because you will have combinations of problems. And of course, they had the problems, and it was perfectly justifiable. They came with queries and sought clarifications, and Guruji had to do that 2.5 hours writing letters every day is almost, for me, it is a criminal waste of time.
No. He was very generous. He was really very
generous. Because that was his duty. See, identified that it's my duty. I've committed, now it's my duty. So without grudge, he did it. He derived satisfaction out of it. Because otherwise he would not have been energetic throughout. So he knew that there was a flaw. But then he had opted for that. He said, no, I must complete the commitment. I should not shirk from it. And he did it wholeheartedly. That's a different thing. Anyway. Okay.
We didn't know how blessed we were. We were in awe of him, but we didn't really know how blessed we were.
Anything else? Any questions? We can sit later sometime and deal with it. Now, nothing is flowing from my mind. If had it been flowing, I would have certainly said something, but I've said enough and I'm exhausted.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Pump has stopped. The pump has stopped, so there is no heart pumping.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
This is excellent. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Namaskar.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Light. Stay with us as we continue to unfold the life's work of BKS Iyengar and the auspicious subject of yoga. Today, I leave you with this quote from Guruji on teaching. To do is hard, but to teach is still harder. Do not teach only to teach. Teach to improve the pupil. To be a teacher requires tremendous, vigorous discipline on oneself. We are teachers because somebody demands it from us, but the teacher should first rub his own self and teach afterwards. Until next time, shine bright.